Reading D&D horror stories, quote-unquote, online, or listening to some scratchy-voiced grifter read them out on YouTube can be a good way to waste a few hours, at least when there is nothing else you can set your mind to. It's a good way to kill some time. It is also a good way to kill what remaining faith you have in the role-playing game community. The writing oozes with the coldness of social libertarianism, the clinical formality of a therapy discussion circle, which, to be fair, is what a lot of people want RPGs to be. People who cannot fathom others not adhering to their own conception of social norms, many of which did not come about until the last 10 years or so. The eagerness with which these sorts recommend dropping one D&D game for another to find a group that is right for you, as they would say, rather than compromising, shows that these people do not have friends, and it goes to show their mindset of disposability toward relationships of all types, which is why so many of these Redditor freaks are in polyamorous relationships that go to shit after several months. But there is far more to it than that. Large numbers of these stories engage in the cancerous Reddit trend of "Am I the asshole?" posting, where the user is posting a story, usually embellished heavily, to get validation that they were in the right, or the bad guy in the story is an overt stereotype of a racist, sexist, transphobic, incel mindset, man or Trump supporter. The number of people who are kicked out of D&D groups must be through the roof if these stories are even a small cherry-picked sample of the RPG player base. To a D&D player from the 1990s, these stories would seem ridiculous, almost incredulous, but then so would the proliferation of bullshit like X cards, which the players in these stories seem to endorse the use of. The X cards, which evoke the soulless aura of a human resources manager. They are overreacted to, but not because of what they are. It is because of what they represent. It is because of what these horror stories represent. A tabletop gaming base so full of soy-infused, sensitive little bitches with the cancerous idea that D&D is a quote-unquote collaborative storytelling experience with all the baggage that it brings along, the ethos that the dungeon master's job revolves around fellatio rather than impartial judgment, around rule of cool rather than rule of genre realism, that the entire goal is for everyone to be supported and validated. These people do not want to play role-playing games. They want social validation, and they want to get it from something different from what they usually do. The characters they create are based around their own ego and are extensions of their desperate need to be unique and interesting in a sea of so many like them. That is why they so often play freak shit. They see session 0 as a prerequisite to any game. They always are ready to walk away because any social experience that isn't 100% entertaining to their ADHD-riddled brains at all times is not worth continuing with. They have no dedication to the hobby, to their fellow players, to anything but their latest dopamine fix and the fact that they cannot get the special attention they so desperately crave from video games. It is a slightly different flavor of gratification, that is all. One could say that is why anyone engages in any hobby, but there is a difference between how these Reddit freaks engage in it versus the grognards of old. Those men were happy to toil away in their basement, exploring Castle Greyhawk for hours on end, with no one watching, with no Reddit karma to reward them, with no social validation from the internet. They were willing to lose their characters without throwing a hissy fit that their tabaxi warlock, that is essentially some projection of their own personality, was to die tragically in some dungeon somewhere. These were men of war games who had subsumed their own ego, who did not believe in their own immortality, who did not feel entitled to heroism, but instead made themselves fit to claim it. Of course, they did this all through the proxy of games. They did not win any real valor, since that is all but impossible in our modern world. But they played at that, a deeper, more fulfilling kind of game than the circle jerk power wank of D&D 5th edition. If any of those great men, Gygax, Arneson, Ward, and so many others, whose names have been stricken from the Dungeon Crawl Classics credits by social justice warriors, could see the kind of preening, attention-seeking dopamine addicts who would be more recognizable as 13-year-old girls on LiveJournal and MySpace, they would be turning in their graves. The reasons people enjoy the hobby has evolved. Can we blame the internet? Can we blame Big Bang Theory? All we can really hope for is that RPGs die off as a mainstream interest so that these insufferable morons finally move on to something else, and we can have peace again.